You're listening to Sunday Morning Praise with your favorite church girl, the one, the only Kayla J. And it's time for us to get mentally church. Throughout these months, we will talk about something that could be triggering for some. So please listen with caution. We're going to be discussing trauma with children and how we discuss mass shootings and all the happenings of the world with our young people. So again, please help me welcome to Sunday Morning Praise our friend to the show, Leah Lloyd of Journey Beyond Counseling and Consulting. Good morning, Leah.
Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you again.
It is good to see you too. I'm excited, and that might be a bad word, but I
No,
am
yeah,
excited to get to this topic because it is definitely something near and dear to my heart. I love our children, and
absolutely.
they're going through some really traumatic
Mm-hmm.
times.
Mm-hmm.
I would say more traumatic than when you and I were in school. We didn't have to worry about mass shootings in school, but it seems like that is the norm now for our children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember like more so there were different kinds of mass events, but less targeted towards young people. And then I was in school around the time of Columbine, but that was like shocking and one of the first biggest ones that gained like national coverage. And so, again, just to reiterate, this is a heavy topic. And so, even though we're talking about children, this broadcast may not be appropriate for your children to listen to unless you talk to them first and then um, listen with them again. So, this is for leaders, church leaders, parents, caregivers, anyone who cares over children, has in communication, conversation with children, teachers, things like that. I do know that teachers are now having to be tasked with having these conversations more consistently as schools are now doing active shooter drills. And so, as a parent, as an aunt, I'm hearing more about this and what they're telling the children and what they're teaching the children. And instead of being like upset or angry, like deeply upset, and however, I listen because I want to also know what my child is being told in school and how they are told to protect themselves in school and what's the protocol. And so different schools have different protocols. So I won't go over like that. What we're going to talk about is just the conversations. And so when we think about talking to children about any topic, so children up to teenagers, we have to really make sure that we are speaking to them on their developmental level. Now, just because someone is 18 doesn't mean that they are at a place where they can still process like we think a typical 18-year-old. I think because of the pandemic, also, I tell everybody take 2 years off of every child's age, every young person's age, and that's kind of where they fall with like some processing and understanding and things like, just because the pandemic really delayed some things for many people, socialization, critical thinking. There was just some regression developmentally, not negatively per se, but just we can't continue to expect so much of children processing wise because we had that major event, which was also traumatic, that we had to have conversations with children about. So first off, make sure that before you enter in the space that you understand the room. Read the room and make sure that it's developmentally appropriate. So with smaller children, they may or may not even be aware of the violence that is taking place locally or nationally. So that's the other thing. If they don't know, it's not necessarily something you need to bring to them. But you do want to check in and just ask them, do you feel safe at school? Has anybody been talking about whatever topic like at school? So typically the schools also send like a paper home where they are telling you that these things are going to happen. And that's a great way to open the conversation. Like, well, the school sent this particular paper. What is the teacher saying? And you can have more of a conversation around that. Leaders and parents, please use wisdom and discern when is a good time or if it's even necessary to discuss heavy topics like school shootings and local violence with your young people. Some young people are very aware, like some children hang out with older people, so they used to watching the news, right? So they may be socialized differently around information than maybe some other children that are being more sheltered or shielded. And that's not a negative thing, but you can discern when in your church, as you build relationships with children, you know what children can handle what things. So if there's an incident, I would encourage you to not have the same conversation with your smaller children as you will with your teenagers. This is not a big group conversation. This is a, like, you know how Sunday school is broken up developmentally in those classes? These conversations should be done the same. And sometimes they may even require one-on-one communication as well, and partnering with parents to have the conversation. So it may be that the parents need to be present along with you, so everybody's getting the same information and entering the conversation in the same way. And Also, like I talked about, having general conversations about personal safety is appropriate because you're always checking in with your child to see how aware they are. So, are you aware of this? Are you aware of this? Some kids are just in their own world. They don't know who's coming and going and what's happening. But it's a great way to begin to teach them how to be more aware of their surroundings too. Not to make them be overly cautious on high alert, but just make them aware, but also talk about when are you safe? Who are you safe with? Where do you feel more safe? Because helping a child to feel grounded and in control is a great way to help them navigate the anxiety that may come when we're talking about these heavy topics. So also, as a child becomes older, they are more exposed. Now I know, but like everybody, kids have access to all of this on the phone. They do. You should regulate that. Please do not allow your children to have unlimited access to your phone, to the internet. As leaders and parents, when a kid say, "Can I get your phone?" No. Or if they already have their own devices, go ahead and put as many blocks and barriers to things on there as you possibly can. And that's to protect them because their little brains can't handle. They're already receiving so much imagery, even from like games and video games and YouTube, even the things that are already heavily regulated, still have a lot in there that we probably don't want them to be exposed to. So limit their exposure. But once they get older and you really can't regulate it the same, then the conversations will shift. And so asking your young person what they have heard, what their thoughts about it. So pause, hold space for that. So what have you heard about this? Have you heard about this? What do you think about it? And ensure that you're providing factual information. So just because we're humans, it's like a bad game of telephone. Sometimes you end up getting a lot of facts misconstrued, or you may just get things that are not completely accurate. And so make sure you also know all of the facts so that you can then correct the information and make sure that they are well informed. There's nothing wrong with making sure your young person is well informed. It's already out there. Make sure they know. And this is across the board when we're talking about heavy topics, maturing, sex, violence. They need to know the truth. It doesn't have to be the hard, terrible truth, like per se, as far as like give them everything, but they need to know facts. So you don't need to show them like gory pictures or graphic pictures. This is what can happen. Don't do that. Just give them the facts. And in both of these groups, like when we talk about the smaller, younger children and older, provide a space for questions. Do you have any questions? And it's okay if you don't have all the answers, but also let them know, I do not know, but I will look into that. And you can also talk about you being like, this is concerning to me. This makes me sad, because this also shows them that you have emotions and that you are connected. You're not just cut off because you're an adult and you don't have feelings, because it's okay and it's appropriate for them to have feelings about these topics. Also, don't dismiss or over spiritualize in hopes that it will provide comfort and make you more comfort. Yes, we know God can do anything, and we continue to believe that prayer is appropriate. Absolutely. but just don't push it to the side. But like, well, we're just gonna keep praying about it, and then that's it. Because that doesn't. That's just like a band aid that people use because they lack depth or range, but make that a part of the conversation. Don't make that the stop and start of the start and stop of the conversation, because it doesn't give anything. So you can start these conversations with prayer. Yes, it help, like ask the Lord to be in the midst and give you the words, and let people be receptive of the information and guarding their hearts and minds. And you pray for safety. You have the conversation, and then we pray again, because that's what we do in church. We open meetings with prayer, we close meeting in prayer. But what I mean by don't let it be the start and stop, meaning like we just gonna pray in the conversation. No, no, because it is imperative that we become more engaged and involved in the conversations. Um, so don't over spiritualize. I talked about limiting exposure, and also just paying attention to your children. When I say your children, because as a leader, these are your kids too. Um, the children are also experiencing higher rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD. We talked about vicarious trauma before, and you can have very similar symptoms as someone who has post traumatic stress disorder. And so paying attention to that, noticing if the child is becoming more anxious or more fearful, or hyper vigilant meaning more watchful, more worried and concerned. Culturally, I think more people and even more kids are more aware of, like, okay, I see all the exits and all the stuff like that. That may be a trauma response, but also just something they've been taught. But it's the hypervigilance of, I'm not gonna sit with my back to the door, or like I need to be able to see everybody, or they're closely like connected to their person, their caregiver, an adult, so they have a hard time separating. So the separation anxiety, paying attention to that. And it is okay to get your child therapy. I'm going to say it every time, y'all. Therapy, counseling, go get it for your children. Because you can also bring in a mental health professional. You can bring in a safety expert to help you have the conversation. Also know when where you've reached your limit of knowledge, and bring in someone else that is an expert on the matter. And you may bring in a therapist to help with the mental health component. Like I said, you can bring in a safety expert to talk more about the safety component, depending on how you want to approach the topic. But making sure that you are just paying attention to your children and paying attention to any warning signs or symptoms of anxiety, depression, PTSD. Um, so as we try to reassure children of safety, like I said, I want to reiterate this too. Make sure that you can identify where your kid feels safe. So that's a place that they can always, their soft place to land, the place that they can always ground themselves. I know I'm safe at my parents' house. I'm safe with my grandparents. I'm safe with godparents or aunt, uncles, wherever. I feel safe at school. And asking your child if they feel safe at school. Why? Why not? What are some safe spaces in school? Is it the principal's office? Is it the counselor's office? Because when you are not around, there needs to be many layers of people that the kids have access to. So if I can't get to my mom or my youth leader at church, who can I go to? Where can I go to continue to feel safe? So I'm gonna stop there. These are not gonna be long conversations, y'all. So I think this is a good, like, give you a little bit to chew on, to think about, and then when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. But I'm gonna toss it back to you, Kayla, if you have any questions.
No, yes, that this is a really good starting point, and I hope everyone that's listening or watching, that you're able to grasp something from this conversation. I do have one question for you though, Leah.
Mhm.
For youth leaders like myself, and others that are probably listening, how do we set healthy boundaries for ourselves? when having these discussions. Like you said, you want to make sure that kids know that they're safe, where they're safe, who can they talk to. And I've found that in a lot of times they may not mention anything to a parent, but they will mention something
Mhm.
to a youth leader, right?
Mhm.
But we are not their parents, and we
Mhm.
don't know what their parents' outlook on it may be, and we don't
Mhm.
really want to cross that line
Mhm.
of, oh, I didn't want my child to know about that, or I
Mhm.
would have explained it this way. How do we set those boundaries up?
Well, it's always great to invite the parents into the room and have the conversation with them first. Send out a communication first. We know that this particular thing happened and we would like to address it in church. Now we can get on the virtual calls. So we're having an emergency meeting with parents to have this conversation first. You can outline your approach, you can hear from parents, and then develop a plan of how to disseminate information to young people. You can then have a conversation with the young people with their parents' permission. Because I think a lot of it is some of it you're going to have conversations with young people that you don't get immediate permission from parents, but parents trust you with their children or they wouldn't be there, right? In these church spaces, if the parent did not trust you, they wouldn't release their children to you to have them for however long in activities and involved in church. So there's already that layer of trust. So parents are typically discerning of like, okay, I'm fine because I trust this person with my child. If you don't trust that person, then that's a whole nother thing. Um, but also, like I said, the a boundary in communication. Once you feel like you even reached your limit, like I don't feel comfortable with having this particular conversation, then invite someone else in to have the conversation. And if the young person is talking to you, just be honest and real, right? Just be honest and real. Like, this is really heavy. Have you talked to your parent about this? Checking in with them again. It's always good to ask some questions before we just start blurting out answers, just to get some understanding. Have you talked to your parent? Are you comfortable with talking to your parent? Are you comfortable with us talking to your parent together? So now that the child has given you information, you don't want to necessarily hold it because they still need support. These are still children. One person's support is not as great as having multiple people supporting you. It could be life changing, but also checking in with the kid. Hey, I want to talk to your parent about this just so you can have some more support. We can continue the conversation. But I think if you are in leadership, just be mindful of when you that you don't overstep, but that you aren't being fearful either. Because the conversations need to happen, but you also have to be able to regulate how much and what you're saying. So back to the what's developmentally appropriate. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. You did. You
Okay.
did. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So I know it helped me. Hopefully, it helps some of you other youth leaders that are out there listening or watching. Again, this is just part one. We're going to give it to you in small doses because it is very heavy. Again, this
Mm-hmm.
is very heavy. It can be triggering for some people. So
Yeah.
please, if you need to step away, step away. If you need to pause it, pause it. I encourage you to take your time when listening to this series. Leah, thank you again so much for always taking your time to join us here on WURD to help us get mentally church. Please let people know how they can continue to follow you and connect with you when you're not here on Sunday mornings.
The best place right now is my website, journeybeyondcounseling.com. I haven't really been engaged on the socials as of late. I'm going to work on that. However, I'm just across the board limiting my social media interaction. But you can go to the website. If you have any questions, you can go to the contact me page and we can interact in that way. If you have any questions or want to reach out for any reason, you can specify on that page.
Got you. So make sure you connect with her. She's an amazing counselor. I recommend her highly. All right. You're listening to WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM, streaming live at WURDradio.com. This is Sunday Morning Praise with your